Good evening, everybody. Turn to number 7 as we start off this evening. Come, let us worship and bow down. Come, let us worship and bow down. Let us kneel before the Lord our God, our Maker. Come, let us worship and bow down. Let us kneel before the Lord our God, our Maker. For He is our God, and we are the people of His pasture, and the sheep of His hand, just the sheep of His hand. 234, 234. I survey the wondrous cross. We'll try the third and fourth optional ones there, so watch me on that. We'll slow down just a bit. When I survey the wondrous cross on which the Prince of Glory died, my richest gain I count but loss, and pour contempt on all my pride. Forbid it, Lord, that I should boast, save in the death of Christ my God. All the vain things that charm me most, I sacrifice them to His blood. See from His head, His hands, His feet, sorrow and love flowing all down. Did as such love and sorrow meet, o'er thorns compose so rich a crown, where the whole realm of nature mine, that were a present far too small, That's fine. Lord, we thank you that we gather in your house this evening. Lord, we thank you, we can praise you. Lord, that we stand before the cross, Lord, but it's an empty cross because you came, you died for our sins, and then, Jesus, you arose, and you're seated at the right hand of the Father now. We just praise you for that, and pray now as we go on our time of study together that we would be meditating on that as we look at your word as an overall picture and just learning more about you. We ask this in Jesus' name. Amen. All right, kiddos. They are eager. All right. One. All right. So, last Sunday, we got through that first bucket. If you got your paper, we're going to kind of continue on with that. Is this on? I don't think it's on. I do not. Does somebody have a blank one? We can go copy real fast. Has everybody else got one? So, I think 4. Just do 4, 5, half a dozen. You know, something like that. Yeah. Hey, Jonathan, is number 10 on by chance? Mike, number 10? I got a green light, but I ain't got nothing. I'm talking. Hold on. Did it get unplugged? Nope, I'm plugged in. Sorry, it's not number 10. I lied to you. How about number 1, 2, 3, 4? Try number 4. It's not muted, is it? Number 4, test, test, test. There we go. I'm there. There. Okay. All right. See if clicky works. There. I don't know. Clicky's clicking. Yeah. All right. So, tips for reading the paper. So, here it comes coming out there, but it's basically what's on the screen here. So remember, we're going to look at what just happened and what's about to happen. Remember that it's a narrative story, so it's not just. This is not like reading the Missouri Law Municipal Codes or anything like that. That could be boring. This, I guess you might think this is boring, or it could be boring, but no. It's telling a story as we go along with it. So remember, looking at what just happened and what's about to happen. So the story is going to point to itself. The buckets. We're going to continue on. It's really where we're going to be at is in the buckets on that. And as we go through that, looking at, again, the theme that's behind it, or what's the macro element, that's going to be woven in amongst all of this. And then the last one is the question for you. Be curious about what you're reading. How does this apply to you, or what's God showing you about this? How can you apply this to your life? Some of this you're going to look at and be like, I don't know how you're applying that. But maybe the actual commandment isn't what's being applied. Maybe what's behind the commandment is really what God's communicating to you. Or maybe he's just communicating to something about himself in that. So just kind of be curious about that. So again, we talked about what just happened. Those are just some examples that we went through. And then the buckets. We started with the ritual calendar. Ritual sacrifice, we're going to be jumping in tonight. Ritual holiness, civil codes, and criminal codes. Those are the 5 buckets that, again, people far smarter than me have come up with, but it does kind of encompass all of the Torah. There was our ritual calendar that we looked at. Remember, we talked about anything that has to do with the calendar, the sacred calendar, looking something to do with the Sabbath or the number 7. That's going to be key within that. And we looked at all the festivals and feasts there, and surprisingly, how many is there? That's right, there is 7. You see 8 on the list, but that's because the Passover is one day of the Feast of Unleavened Bread, so it rolls into it. So that's our 7th, I guess it'd be the second one as we're looking at it this way. So, all right. Any questions on the calendar aspect, the festivals, the feasts, that kind of stuff? I'll do my best to answer. If not, then we'll move into sacrifice. Because again, the question is, was Hebrews 9, was it 9:22? I think. I should have bookmarked that. Any of this, it's like Bible drill stuff. First one who gets to read it here. In fact, the law requires that nearly everything be cleansed with blood, and without the shedding of blood, there is no forgiveness. So there's no remission of sins. So what exactly is going on with the idea of the sacrifice? So we've got a little video here that kind of goes into that and ties sacrifice and Jesus and ties it all together, and then we're going to jump in deeper into that here. So I think the volume's right, Jonathan, but if not, you do your thing. You'll be good.
Be good for people to live in peace, act with love. Evil, like when someone steals, they've created injustice. To make it right, but they're evil because they. And they too. Get rid of all the evil in the world. It's the same evil that's inside of me. We have all, and we keep doing it. And so this kind of, if God, He'll have to get rid of us. And about the story of the Bible, this God, that not, He's going to do it without destroying humanity. So how is He going to do that? Well, animal sacrifice, which I know it seems weird to us, but for of God's justice and grace, so even removed, but God be a substitute. It's symbolic, and the biblical atonement, which means to cover death. But there's a second to this ritual. Remember, and or define. So the priest would symbolize by sprinkling the animal's blood in different parts of the temple. So the animal's blood cleaning things? Well, and it's a symbol of the blood life. And the sprinkling of the blood is this of evil in their community. In the Bible, purification. And so the temple, clean space where God can live together in peace. So between Israel and God. And the Israel, God's love, grace through these symbols. And by this would compel them to become people of love and grace too. Right. So, well, he talked about this. The continual lives had become meaningless because people in their midst ignored the poor and the oppressed. Even the Israelite kings were distorting justice. But and deal with evil, but in a proper way. The king would become a servant, and evil committed by his own people, and as a sacrifice. He's the king. And give for many. And that and so we hear about his death for us. It covers humans up for contributing to this world. But so we can peace with God. So that Jesus' death. But there is more to the story. Yeah. Was not. He wrote. And so evil, which means he lives on. He is the perfect sacrifice to which all sacrifices were pointing all along. So stop sacrifice, but they rituals that perform. The first just so personal death and come back to Jesus. So is the sacred ritual that joins your story to Jesus' death and his resurrection, which is a reenactment of Jesus' last meal with his disciples, and he used bread to portray his coming death as a sacrifice. And so now Jesus, they take the bread to remember and to participate in the power of his death and in his life. So God's love and encouragement of love and grace. But they a new life source. The very dead is the same power that can deal with the evil in others and transform us who lead lives of love and peace.
Ritual sacrifice. So, Bible trivia time, where is the first sacrifice that's an atonement sacrifice? It's not the first sacrifice, but it's one for atonement. Where do you think through your early Bible stories, where do you think the first one might be? We are going to talk a little bit briefly about the first sacrifice, but it's not an atonement one or a sin offering. A little before that one, but I thought that too. But one before that. Nope. Before Abraham. It's in Genesis. Nope. It's not Abel. Those would be fellowship offerings. What those are, or offerings of first fruits. Those are Thanksgiving offerings. There. We will talk about that briefly. But no, it's close. It's not far removed from the garden. I'll say that. It would be, and yes, there is that, but okay, all right, yeah, that one. Okay, you're talking about the animals there and the animal skins, and yeah, that's possible. I'm talking about the man bringing how about that one? Man bringing an atonement offering. So in your Bible story, we got, well, who's the next big figure after Adam and Eve in that realm? Who's the big figure? Who what? Noah, yes. So it's Noah. What's Noah do when they get off the ark? He makes a sacrifice, yeah. And so in a way, it's atonement sacrifice. He's saying thank you, yes, but what does God say as a result of that? This is Genesis chapter 8. So Noah's come out of the ark. He's gathered together. Verse 20 says, Noah built an altar to the Lord, and taking some of all the clean animals and clean birds, he sacrificed burnt offerings on it. The Lord smelled the pleasing aroma and said in his heart, never again will I curse the ground because of man, even though every inclination of his heart is evil from childhood. And never again will I destroy all living creatures as I have done. So that kind of ties it back into why did God destroy all life through the flood? Well, it's because of sin and death, right? And so he's not going to, so this becomes an atonement sacrifice in that, a sin offering. So this would be the first one, yeah. So we see... my screens just went bye-bye everywhere. You broke it. Yeah, come back. My screen might come back. That's okay. I don't need mine. I'm good. Yeah, so that's the first time we have it. Now, what's interesting about this, and this is going to kind of feed into where we go beyond this. What's God say? Verse 21 said, the Lord smelled the pleasing aroma. So what's he smelling? Barbecue, yeah. Yes. So what's interesting about this, this is kind of just a little bit of a tiny bit of a rabbit hole here. So the terminology, the way it's regarded in the Hebrew Bible, that when God is angry, it says that his nose grew hot. Okay? That's the terminology that's said. His nose grew hot. And that seems kind of weird, but I want you to think about it. If you are think about you're super angry, what happens to you physiologically? Your face turns red. Yeah, and you can feel flushed, right? Your face can feel flushed. You can actually physically feel hot. You're hot inside and you're hot on the outside, right? It's burning out. So the wording there is that the Lord's nose grew hot. So it's intriguing then, what's happening here? What he's smelling, through which if you're going to put a physical approach to it, he's smelling through the same organ that he would get angry through. So it's kind of appeasing that anger. Now, here's what's also interesting. Guess when the first time, and Jim, you can't answer this one because you already know the answer to this question. When is the first time that it says that God got angry? Anybody know? Huh? Nope. Quite a way. You got to go quite a while. You got to go a few hundred years before we get to it. This is what's crazy. Think about it. Think of the times that, huh? Nope. Keep on going. Keep on going. You got to get out of that book. You got to skip a whole book to get to it. It's Exodus. Yeah. And of all people, it's Moses. When he's on Mount Sinai, it's the very first time. It went after Moses' fifth. Lord, send somebody else. And it says, and the Lord grew angry. That's the first time this is that God gets angry. Now, is that the first time God got angry? I don't know. That's the first time it's recorded. But also, what do we know about God? He is what? Slow to anger, right? He gives that as a descriptor of himself. He's slow to anger. And so I think it's interesting then that we don't, even throughout all the craziness of Genesis, it doesn't say he got angry. He's grieved. We see that. The Lord looked down on the earth and said, this is back in chapter 6, for I am grieved that I have made them. When he sees what humanity is doing, he says, I'm grieved. So yeah. So anyway, but he smells it and he's appeased and everything is good. He smelled the pleasing aroma. So that's our first sacrifice of atonement, okay? That's happening there. But then to an understanding of location a little bit here, where does the first, Katie, you mentioned Cain and Abel, where does the first offerings take place? We're not told this specifically, but I think we can infer this. Where do you think Cain and Abel went to give their offerings? Where would you go if you were going to give an offering to God? There you go. You want to get as close to him as you can. And as close as you can get is the gate of the Garden of Eden, the Garden of Eden. Huh? They would have known. Yeah. So what is preventing them from entering back into the garden? Yeah, the angel of the flaming sword. Yeah. What do you think would happen to you if you stepped into the garden? You die. Right. What happened if you stepped behind the curtain in the Holy of Holies? You would die. Yeah. Why didn't the high priest die when he went on the Day of Atonement? But something died. Yeah. The atoning sacrifice had to die. Something or someone has to die before you can step foot in the presence of God. Why? God's perfect, and we ain't. Yeah. And so we can kind of see this picture. So that's, again, the Holy of Holies is divided by that curtain. That curtain's got woven into it a cherubim, right? It's preventing you from getting to where God is, unless something dies on your behalf. And that's Jesus, exactly. Yeah, it all points to Jesus. So thinking about that idea, then in that, why is then without the shedding of blood, is there no forgiveness? Because death has to happen. God is perfect. We ain't. And to step foot in that will be death. That type of offering there is called an olah. That's either spelling there. And it means a going up offering. So why did God smell the aroma? Because what was happening to the sacrifice? It was going up. No, that's right. There's no barbecue sauce. But does good barbecue need barbecue sauce? I guess that's good smoked meat. That's different. Smoke is not quite the same. You can smoke a barbecue, but yeah, that ain't quite always the same. But yeah, no. Huh? You got gopher wood? I'm gonna go with it. It was gopher wood. It might have been, yeah. So everybody's been looking for the ark, and I'm not saying it ain't out there, and I ain't saying nobody's found it or any of that stuff, but if you're going to build yourself houses and things like that, you got two options. You can cut down some trees, or you can take apart logs that are already cut up. I'm going to take the boat apart. That's just me. And then where do you think he got the wood for it? Probably just took some of the wood off the ark. I don't know. I could be completely wrong, but that's what I would do. It seems way less work than cutting down some, especially these poor trees just popped up. And if you're going to be building stuff, they're not going to be, this ain't construction-grade lumber that's popping up. These trees are new trees, right? It takes them a while to grow. So anyway, I dare say the ark pretty much got dismembered and rebuilt. Aside from hearing it on a podcast once, and that's where I was like, that makes sense. Yeah. So I haven't, aside from that, no. I don't know if there's any. Yeah. Because everybody looks for it and, can't find it. And I know, and it could, will it be rotted by now? Well, yeah, but we got the trees and, the redwoods out there in California, and Arizona and all that. You get the, what do you call it? Petrified forest, yeah. So, I mean, we know that stuff happens. But, yeah, that's what I would do. I would think they probably just took apart the ark and built houses and things out of it. But I could be wrong. It could still be somewhere. It'd be cool if they found it. That would be cool. But it's a going up offering. So how do we transmit the sacrifice to God? Burn it, and it goes up in the smoke. Yeah, exactly. Kind of another word picture that's painted by that. Think about in the Revelation. What's it talk about? It says that the smoke going up is what? Please, yeah, but in the Revelation, it talks about this wasn't in any of my notes or planning, so hence I have no. I was like, oh yeah, I forgot about that. But it talks about the prayers of the saints, right? Going up. Yes, you can use Google for this stuff. But be careful of the results you get. Just because that's, Revelation chapter 8. Okay. Yeah. The smoke of the incense together with the prayers of the saints went up before God from the angel's hand. Yeah. So we see that kind of idea there. It's going up. The prayers are going up. Verse 3, another angel had a golden censer came and stood at the altar. He was given much incense to offer with the prayers of all the saints on the golden altar before the throne. And so that's going up. It's transmitting them to God is the idea of that. And that's similar to the idea of the sacrifice doing that. So the reason I said be careful what you do. So I typed that in, and then the very first thing I get is a couple of Catholic websites. Boom, right away. So, Catholic website. In fact, biblical scripture evidence to pray to Mary and the saints. That's the first search result. Revelation chapter 8. It talks about that. So that's the idea of the old law. It's the going up offering. It's going up. It's rising up. We talked about location in Genesis chapter 4, and then we see the Day of Atonement. We talked about that last week when we talked about the Day of Atonement in the two places, Leviticus 16 and then chapter 23. So we see all these sacrifices in there. And now, not every sacrifice is a sin offering, okay? And sometimes you're going to see some translational stuff that's going to come into play on that. And you're going to, sometimes it's worded for a sin offering. That's not always the case. We'll talk about that here when we get to cleanliness here, which is the next slide, actually. But we're talking specifically with ritual sacrifice, specifically the sin offerings going into that. Again, how's that transmitted? It's transmitted up to God in the fire. The going up is the idea. Noah provides that the first time. Cain and Abel's would be a thanksgiving or a fellowship offering, okay? But these would be the sin offerings, atonement, even the Passover. You know, the Passover lamb wasn't burned, it was eaten, but the idea there, it dies on behalf of that. So, any questions? I'm not going into a whole bunch of these, but when you're looking through the sacrifices, again, look at them. When you read about one, think about this. Okay, what's going on here? What's it doing? Okay? And realizing something had to die. And that's something we really miss out on, I think, because of, and I'm not arguing we need to have the sacrificial system. No, that's not what I'm saying. But I do think we miss out just a little bit on really grasping the cost of life. Think about the lamb that was going to be, that's sacrificed. Even the Passover lamb that's eaten. So what has that lamb done? Nothing. In fact, it's a pure, spotless lamb. Like, he looks good on the outside, and it's just a lamb. What's a lamb do? Lamb does lamb things, He goes out, blocks in the. You laughing? That's a lamb. Yeah, it does lamb things. It does what it's made to do, right? And then it's going to die, or the goat. It does goat things. And then it's, the goat for Day of Atonement, it was a goat. And then what's going to happen to it? It's going to die. And it died because we messed up. Not it. But, we're the one that messed up. And now that goat's got to its life has to end in order for us to approach God. And that's really, I think we miss out on the weight of that, the cost of that. And can you realize, just think about the amount of, especially if you start reading through the sacrifices and the everything that's necessary, think about the amount. I mean, it was a revolving butcher shop. Yeah. Think about this. When they were in the wilderness, wandering around, especially there at the beginning, in that first year or so, they ate manna. They had flocks and herds. Why didn't they eat them? That was the starter. That was the starter batch from the sacrificial system. Yeah. It was like once they got rolling, once the sacrificial system got fired up, it was never going to stop. And that was the idea, is that you're raising these animals and they're constantly dying, constantly having to be killed. Why? Because we can't do it right. We kept messing up. And I think obviously they didn't, but I think when you start to realize the depth and the weight of that, you can actually you get a visual sense of the cost of your sin in that, when there's that much death going on around you. So not only is it because of our sin, that's a subset of that. The next bucket to look at, which involves sacrifice as well, but not for sin offerings, is ritual holiness. These will be your ceremonial cleansing laws, okay? Why? Because there can't be no smell of death on you. Not only is God perfect insofar as no sin, none of that, but even the idea of death is something is tainted. Okay? And there cannot be any of that. Because holiness means whole, complete, perfect. Okay? And so, even if, which we can't, but even if we could live the perfect life and never ever sin, guess what? we're still going to die. You know? And so we're still tainted in that. And so we can't have that. To approach God, you can't even have any taint of that at all. So we get to chapter 12. It's got a bunch of these. And if you read through this, and some of these are weird, okay? And weird stuff, and this is where some of the translational issues come into play, because I think King James may still refer to these a lot as sin offerings. And that, the first few times I read that, it bothered me because I'm like, I don't understand, why is it a sin for things that happen physically to you that you have zero control over? It's because it's not really a sin offering, okay? So if it says sin offering, and we'll see that here in chapter 12, a better idea would be purification, okay, on that. Leviticus, sorry. Yeah, we're bouncing all over. So, yes, if I forget where we're at, because a lot of this gets shifted around, and we're going to look at several of them. Leviticus chapter 12. Purification after childbirth. Say to the Israelites, a woman becomes pregnant and gives birth to a son will be ceremonially unclean for 7 days, just as she is unclean during her monthly period. On the 8th day, the boy is to be circumcised. Then the woman must wait 33 days to be purified from her bleeding. She must not touch anything sacred to go to the sanctuary until the days of her purification are over. If she gives birth to a daughter, for 2 weeks the woman will be unclean as during her period. Then she must wait 66 days to be purified from her bleeding. When the days of her purification for a son or daughter are over, she is to bring to the priest at the entrance of the tent of meeting a year-old lamb for burnt offering and a young pigeon or a dove for a sin offering. He shall offer them before the Lord to make atonement for her, and then she'll be ceremonially clean from her flow of blood. So, you read that, and if you're not realizing what's behind this, that's just weird. Like, why is she, what has she done wrong? What's she done wrong? Nothing. Actually, didn't she kind of do what she was commanded to do, be fruitful, multiply? Yeah. But yet we got to make a sacrifice. Why do we got to make a sacrifice? Well, having observed my daughter's being born, and it was a C-section, but still, there's a lot of body fluids that leak out. And a newborn baby, I love all the, on TV shows and everything else, they got the little babies all wrapped up and so on. They don't look like when they come out, it's a mess, they got to kind of clean them up a little bit. They need to. But, so what's going on there? There is body fluids leaking out. And specifically, there's blood that's leaking out. What is the blood? What did it say? Life. Yeah, the blood is the life of it. So what has happened? The life has leaked out. Which, while that's not, in some cases, in serious cases, it can be death. But, in a normal, healthy pregnancy and delivery, that's not death, but it's still understanding that your blood is leaking out of you. That's your life leaking out. And so it points to this idea of death, okay? And again, so why does purification need to happen? Because, in a way, it's like it's the reminder of death that's happened with the blood loss there. The same regulations go when a sexual encounter has happened. And again, you can read that and say, what? That doesn't even make sense. Except that the life fluids are leaking out of the body. Okay? They're not where they're supposed to be. They've come out. And so, again, that's that reminder of death, that ever-present reminder of death. And I think it's there to remind that we live in a fallen world and that we're dying, right? There's that constant reminder of death all around us that has to be resolved some way, somehow. And so that was what the sacrifices are for. And then to allow you to back into the presence of God. Not just because of sin, but now because of death. That's going on with that. Disease, the same thing, okay? You can be, disease breaks out. Again, this is the idea of you're dying, A perfectly healthy person has no diseases, Even in the idea of their homes. The mildew, chapter 13, is all about infectious skin diseases, and then it gets into mildew and mold, and there's all kinds of rules about that. What kind of mold and mildew is it? And things like that. And guess what it always follows it up with? And then we've got to have some type of process to cleanse that, okay? The sermon this morning, what was the leper to do? Yeah, go to the priest, show yourself to the priest, do they would usually do a ceremonial bath, and then he would what? He would make a sacrifice. Why? To show, to demonstrate, hey, that this is cleansed, and to restore to restore that relationship. There was something broken about him physically that's now been resolved. Whenever Jesus does a healing, what's he usually tell him to do? Go and show yourself to the priest. Make the sacrifices, make the offerings that are necessary for that. Again, it's the idea of God is perfect, God is holy, and to approach him we also must be. And again, the only way to do that and not die is for something else to take our place in that. Again, the idea of dirtiness and filthiness. Again, it's even that reminder of sin, okay, that's mixed in with all of this. Any questions on the holiness, the cleansing? Well, for 7 days, bring it 2 pigeons to Rich the next time you... Little squab, that's a delicacy. Yeah, so again, but it's just that reminder, of life and death. And, what does it take to approach God? Perfect, complete holiness. And we ain't in that, so. Civil codes. As I put down there, a new creation community structured to care for the poor and to prevent injustice. Many of these categories can be bothersome to us. We might be like, I don't know what's going on. This really bothers me when I read these things. But again, it's pointing to a different style of living, okay? Back up there. Deuteronomy chapter 21. Deuteronomy chapter 20 is literally commandments about how to go to war. And who can go to war and who can't go to war. So if you've just planted a vineyard, don't let him, you don't get to go to battle. Because why? You haven't got to enjoy it. If you just got married, or if you're engaged to marry, don't send him to battle, because what if he dies and didn't get to marry her, and then somebody else is going to marry his beloved, Don't do that. If you just got married, you're exempted from military service. There's even the idea of somebody scared on that. Again, it's just thinking of people as what? They are what? They're image bearers of God, and just some of the stuff you look at and be like, well, yeah, that kind of makes sense. I get it. Why? Yeah, if you're engaged to be married, you don't want to go off to battle and die, that'd be kind of crappy, So yeah, that's thinking of the other person. I like that, okay? Then we're going to get down here to Deuteronomy 21:10. So we're okay with those laws. We get to Deuteronomy 21:10. When you go to war against your enemies, and the Lord your God delivers them into your hands, and you take captives, if you notice among the captives a beautiful woman and are attracted to her, you may take her as your wife. Bring her into your home and have her shave her head, trim her nails, and put aside the clothes she was wearing when captured. After she has lived in your house and mourned for her father and mother for a full month, then you may go to her and be her husband, and she shall be your wife. If you're not pleased with her, let her go wherever she wishes. You must not sell her, treat her as a slave, since you have dishonored her. That's probably not going to hear any sermons on that one. He's bringing the pigeon that Sunday, yeah. No, that one's not going to be in your children's storybook Bible. And we might just skip over that one because that's harsh, We're talking about, but first, did you notice the wording here? If you notice among the captives, another word of that be, if you see among the captives a beautiful woman and are what? Attracted. You desire her. Yeah, exactly. And you're going to do what? You're going to take her. There's a warning attached to this. It's not stated, but that warning is loud and clear. Be careful about what you're about to do. And then the warning is answered on the other end. If you get buyer's remorse here, you don't just get to sell her to somebody else, okay? So, as harsh as this sounds, do you realize, though, we are leaps and bounds of the contemporary cultures around, okay? what are we emphasizing here? So if she's lived in your house for a month, and she's what? She's mourned her father and your mother. So what are you giving her an opportunity to do? Time to mourn. Yeah, adjust. Yeah. This is as harsh as this sounds, and I'm not arguing that this is a positive thing. Please understand that. But in the culture in which this is going on, do you realize how much more rights, if you could say it that way, this captive woman has in comparison to her contemporaries in any other country around? They would have not been that opportunity. They would have taken her and done what they wanted with her, whenever they wanted to. In fact, it says that you may go to her and you will be her husband and she'll be your wife. We're not talking sex slave. Your wife. That's the terminology here, okay? And as your wife, what is she going to be treated? Well, she needs to be treated like your wife, okay? That's this idea. And again, if you're not pleased with her, you can't just sell her. What do you got to do? You got to let her go. You've dishonored her. So there's a warning. We see that. You see, you desire, you take. Be careful. Again, culturally speaking, this was huge. This law would not exist in any other culture around. They're not going to do that. Shave off her hair. I do believe that's a visual of leaving an old life. She's starting over. In that aspect. Trimming her nails, that kind of thing. You're getting away the clothes that she was wearing when captured. That old life is gone, and she's now living a new life. And that, it's a part of that transition over. Yeah. And I'm not saying this is going to be the case, but understanding also culturally speaking, what religion did the family go with in this culture, in this timeland, in the land in this time period, huh? Well, no. What religion would, if you were any, not just saying Jewish culture, but any culture, what God did you worship? It was the God that the leader of the household did, the father. That was what you were going to worship. Okay, so in a way, whether she is truly a convert to Judaism or not, that's going to be implied. She's going to go to tabernacle. She's going to go to, later on we get synagogue, but that's the idea that was going on there. We see that somewhat a break from that a little bit in Romans. That's one of the conflict that the Roman era, one of the conflict there is all of a sudden now the wives are becoming Christians and the husbands ain't, and there's family conflict over that, That's where you see, and then they and all their household were baptized. Doesn't mean everybody in the house became a believer, but that meant because, like the Philippian jailer was a big one. Everybody in this house was baptized. The Philippian jailer became a Christian, and then it's implied that everybody else in the family did too. Whether they did or didn't, that's an individual thing. But as far as the household was concerned, that's now a Christian house. It would have been viewed that way. So, so she's going to put aside her old life, and she's now going to live a Jewish life. That's kind of the idea on that. So, again, keep in mind the context and the culture in which these things are happening. Some of these rules sound extremely, to our standard, are going to sound egregious, they're going to sound barbaric. And yet realizing that there is this idea built into this of they are a fellow image bearer, okay? Even how they treated slaves. Say, well, the Bible is for slavery. The Bible permits slavery, but remember, culturally, that was a common thing. But the Jews were to treat their slaves way different than all the contemporaries were, in that. And so there's to keep that in mind on that. Tons of Deuteronomy. This section of Deuteronomy has got a lot of this. You get like the rights of the firstborn. There's rules in here why you can't do some things that end up happening, cause conflicts about that, about two wives and, loving one and not the other, that kind of stuff. Rebellious kids, we'll talk about that here in a second. But the idea of the civil codes is to create this environment that models the life in Eden, okay? So everything that we do, that when we see these codes, is supposed to reflect something about Eden. So think about what would it have been in Eden? Well, if you were in Eden, you wouldn't have slaves, so treat your slaves right. You have slaves, so maybe you need to treat them properly, okay? They're fellow image bearers, and so that's kind of the idea in that. the New Testament application of that is going to be the Sermon on the Mount. Because what's the Sermon on the Mount all about? Yeah, it's how we relate to others. And what does Jesus do? He takes so many of the commands from the Torah, and he says what? He's given us the application. Yeah, he says, hey, you've heard that it was said, but I say to you, this is how you should really apply it. What's really behind that is the idea on that. Again, care for others, image of God. Thinking of others, the same as yourself or even better than yourself. How can you serve somebody? Again, righteousness, right living, how we interact with others. That's what righteousness means, is right living. Criminal codes. The last bucket here. Again, it's back to righteousness, how we interact with others, but also it's dealing with corruption on the Holy Covenant family. No tolerance for those corrupting the Holy Covenant family. And we're going to get some laws and commandments in here that are going to be somewhat controversial to our standards today, okay? Understand that. For example, let's see here. If a man has a stubborn and rebellious son who does not obey his father and mother, will not listen to them when they discipline. This is verse 18 of chapter 21 of Deuteronomy. His father and mother shall take hold of him and bring him to the elders at the gate of his town. They shall say to the elders, this son of ours is stubborn and rebellious. He will not obey us. He is a profligate and a drunkard. Then all the men of his town shall stone him to death. You must purge the evil from among you. All Israel will hear of it and be afraid. How many of us with children have taken our kids out and stoned them because they backtalked us? You only got one, so that's it. You gotta, we've jokingly said, I was like, we got two, so do we really want two? Can we? No, just joking. But yeah, we all have those moments like, oh my gosh, what's the old phrase, boy, I brought you into this world, I'll take you back out, yeah. But again, we read this, man, that is shocking language, isn't it? That is shocking. But this idea is no tolerance for those corrupting the Holy Family. Okay, this is a criminal thing. We would not call this a criminal. There's one. If you strike your parents, yeah, you go to jail for that. That's assault. But it was death penalty here. This is the things we get into. Adultery was a punishable by death. Even the idea that a woman who was not a virgin when she is married was punishable by death. She would be stoned on that. And again, we read this, and it's like, man, that is so shocking to us as a culture. All the sexual sins, I believe, in the Torah are going to be capital punishment. And we look at that and we're like, oh my gosh, that is barbaric. Because that's what it feels like. But again, understand what is really behind this. They're in a culture that is part of worship. That is part of the idol worship that goes on. There is, even when you get into Rome, look at they had the temple prostitutes. That's all mixed into the worship time. And so they're like, hey, well, you don't have anything to do with that. We are to be separate. You are to be far apart from that. And again, it was a death penalty for those things. And again, you must purge the evil from among you. There has to be no place for that stuff. Why? You are my people. Remember, what did God call them apart to be? A nation. He starts out with a nation of priests. And then he narrows it down to one family because they all screw that up. He gets down to, okay, we're going to have one family of priests. The rest of y'all are supposed to spread and do what Abraham was to do there. So again, we see these criminal codes that seem harsh, but again, yet they're pointing out the wickedness within the community that needs to be dealt with. And God says, hey, look, you can't have that there. We see that this will be detestable to the eyes of the Lord. Purge the evil from among you. Mm-hmm. Yeah, caught in adultery, yep. No, he didn't condemn her, no. And, two things on that passage, John chapter 8, I believe it is. Two things on John chapter 8. Number one, you'll see a footnote in your Bible that says that the most reliable manuscript evidence does not have that in there, which means that section of John, and then there's a passage in Mark also that neither one of those are in, I think it's John. It's either Mark 8 Or John 8. Yeah, I think maybe it's Mark 8. Now I'm going to look. I said it, so now I need to look it up. Let's just look. John chapter. Yeah, this is John 8. That's right. Okay. Yeah, John 7:53 to 8:11, and that's all about the woman here. And you'll see. No, it says the earliest manuscripts and many other ancient witnesses do not have John 7:53, 8:11 present there, which means most scholars will say this section was not part of John's original gospel account. It was added in by scribes in that time period. But is there anything in that section of John chapter 8 that is counter to anything else Jesus taught? No. Two things with that. Number one, yes, he does not condemn her. But what's he say? Go and sin no more, right? Leave your life of sin. Yeah, leave away. Walk away from that. So there's one. And the second thing is, she was a woman caught in adultery. How was she caught? How did they know that she was in an act of adultery? Because she was caught in the act, it says. Last time I checked, it takes two people. Where's the dude? The dude should be brought out too. He's not. And so Jesus is calling him out. There's a double standard going on here, okay? So no, not gonna. He's like, no, we ain't doing this. And that's why he says, if anyone of you that was sin, let him be the first to throw a stone at her. You know, again, reminder, because again, sin is sin, right? You know, yes, there is degrees of sin. I'm not saying there's not. There is, but at the end of the day, how much sin? I ask this question: Are we separated from God because we are 100% evil? Or is it because we're not 100% good? We're not holy. That's why we aren't in the presence of God. It's because of that tiny speck, that little dot, that one thing. That is why we're not. That's why we're separated from God. It's not that we're pure evil. It doesn't need 100% fail. It's because we're not 100% holy. That's the issue at hand. And so that's what's being brought out here. Jesus is like, hey, look. You know, and again, there's no grace and mercy. And we look at this, again, though, I'm going to go back to what's fascinating about all this is, you know what we do not see throughout the entirety of the Tanakh, the Hebrew Scriptures? So, who commits adultery? Big name. David. Who does not die? Who's not taken out and stoned? David. Huh? Or Bathsheba, yeah. And Bathsheba, she may or may not have had a vote in the matter. However, there is a passage that says if it's in town and she doesn't cry out, she's culpable, you know? So, now, I don't know, one could argue if you're with the presence of the king, that may, actually it's in Deuteronomy 22, right here. Let's see here, it says, if a man happens to meet in town a virgin pledged to be married and he sleeps with her, you shall take both of them to the gate of the town and stone them to death. The girl, because she was in the town and did not scream for help, and the man, because he violated another man's wife. You must purge the evil from among you. But if out in the country a man happens to meet a girl pledged to be married and rapes her, only the man who has done this shall die. Do nothing to the girl. She has committed no sin deserving of death. The idea there, and so there's grace and mercy there. There's justice. If she's in town, she didn't cry out. In town, somebody would hear it. Is the assumption? They don't have windows, like they have holes in their walls. You know, they might have a sheet over it. There's no windows, so you can hear what's going on. Okay, you can hear your neighbor. But if you're out in the country, there's nobody here, then the assumption goes that there's innocence on the woman's part. Okay, so that aspect. But again, we don't see those things actually happening in accordance to the law, though. We don't see David being stoned to death. We don't see other situations happening within that. We don't see, think about it, Absalom. What's Absalom doing? He does die, but he's not taken out by the town doesn't get together and take him out and stone him. He leads a civil war. The town signs up with him, you know? So we don't see these things actually taking place, but we're brought out the idea of this is how serious this stuff is. God is serious. God is holy, and that's what he requires from us. And the idea, this is the kind of culture that should be created within this community. This is supposed to be a new creation community. This is the holy family that's been picked to do what? Not just to sit amongst themselves, but to what? To propagate that out. They, too, were to spread the gospel. Not the gospel yet, but it's still there to spread the news of Yahweh. Okay? It wasn't ever to just be kept among themselves. God's always been global mission-minded from the very beginning. We see those hints of that as we go through. But again, if you're a nation of priests, who are you going to be a priest to? The rest of the world. Yeah, the other nations. Exactly. Yeah. And so that was always the plan for them, was they were to be going out and living a life that says, hey, this is a life that's different. And everybody else going, oh. And then that's going to spread out to the rest of the world. Just like a garden, plant that garden. I believe that Adam and Eve were to have left the garden eventually to plant and expand it. Not to live out in the wilderness, but to convert the wilderness to the garden. The garden was to grow. And I think that's that picture that's being painted throughout all of creation. And that's what's being painted through the Torah. And then Jesus comes on the scene and says, hey, this is how we're going to relate to each other. This is how we're going to do things. And remember, God's slow to anger. He's full of love, abounding in love, steadfast and merciful, and all that. And Jesus says, yeah, and this is what it looks like to actually live that. And that's what's so cool. We'll see more of that when we get to the Gospels, how to read the Gospels. So, the last two items on there, again, what's the theme behind the teaching? Again, look at that. Paul picks up on that. Paul is the master of that. 1 Corinthians 9:9, Paul talks about do not muzzle the ox, which is Deuteronomy 25:4. Do not muzzle the ox while it's treading the grain. And Paul says that has absolutely nothing to do with oxen. It has everything to do with paying the pastor. So you see what Paul is doing. He's saying, okay, what's really behind this thing? What's the overall theme that's going on this, okay? And how can you apply that to yourself? And that's really that fourth point then. How can you apply this to your life? And again, being curious, what is God trying to show me through what's on here? So any questions on that? Because that's going to kind of conclude the Torah, and then we'll move into the next section. And that probably go wisdom literature, I think, next. So in 2 weeks. I encourage you to read through some Deuteronomy, read through some Leviticus. Read through it and look at that. And again, just kind of look at what's going on, what's the story going on, and ask yourself, what's really happening here, and how does this apply to me? Because when we get caught up in just the literality of it, that's when things get stupid, and people will pick up on that, and they're like, yeah, well, you wear polyblend clothes, It's like, well, that's not what that's about, And some of it, yes, there's some practical approaches to things. You can look at that stuff. Don't put, the idea, don't put, new wine in an old wineskin. Well, yeah, it's going to burst. It's kind of a dust statement, but they didn't need a law to tell them that. They already knew that. So what's really behind that, though? Is there something else going on there? I would argue you could even look at that one and even say it's a lifestyle. You can't try to live a Christian life in an old life. You can't be a Christian living the old life. It don't fit. Something's going to pop, Yeah, well, and I think you can apply it there. Again, I think there's multiple applications of that. And again, asking the question, what's really behind this? How does this apply? But even in that, you see how we can take, just this commandment. Again, did they need somebody to tell them that you can do that? No, they understood how wine worked. You'd only do it once, then you realize, then you just tell everybody. God did not have to give that to them on the mountaintop. So what's really behind that? What's really in the background of it? So be curious about those things. Think about that as you go through reading through these. So again, encourage you to read through it. I hope you read through it with a new mindset, and maybe not dread it when you're reading it, and not just go, oh my word, I don't know what's going on here. Even again, reading the mentions of how the tabernacle was built and the tent of meeting, all that. Look through that and see if you can pick up on the Eden themes, pick up on the sevens and that stuff as you're reading through that. So, all right, last. Oh, real quick, here's another weird one, only because I just saw it here. 25:11. If two men are fighting and the wife of one of them comes to rescue her husband from his assailant, and she reaches out and seizes him by his private parts, you shall cut off her hand. Show her no pity. That's pretty harsh. Just saying. That's pretty harsh. What do you think's going on behind that one? So what is very vitally important to an ancient culture, and even here? What is something that you're looked down upon if doesn't happen? No family, no children, no inheritance. What is she just endangered? The inheritance. She's endangered the entire clan by doing this. This is an attack on his life. Because who takes care of you in your old age? Your children. You see what's behind that? Huh? What? Hopefully. Treat your kids right now because they pick your nursing home later. But do you see what's kind of in the background of that verse? We read that and we're like, that's just, I don't know about that one. Show her no pity, but realizing what she's endangered, like a whole clan. She's endangered his life because he no longer has an inheritance. He no longer has